As we know, Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, Allah sent him and cleansed those regions of such rule, and he still allowed those Christians to come and worship, subhanallah. After all that they had done, he allowed them to have their churches, and that is why to this day, the same versions of Christianity, their temples and their churches are still in Jerusalem. Anybody can go there, and that is why for 13 centuries, Muslim, Christian, Jew, they lived side by side. It is not a problem of Jew versus Muslim, not at all. Jewish people lived in that land freely, brethren with their Muslims, friendly neighbors. Everybody knows this. What happened? Very briefly, and I want our youngsters especially to study more. I gave a lecture in more detail. It's called 1914 and the Making of the Muslim World. Okay? I want you to listen to that lecture. I gave it in 2014, in the 100th anniversary of 1914. I want you to listen to that lecture and listen to in detail about the setting up of how Jerusalem took place. So we said two things I want you to do. Number one, theologically, aqidah-wise, Jerusalem is holy for us. Number two, one of the reasons why our heart is so much in pain is because of the sheer brutality and the inhumanity of how this land was taken from the original people and handed over to another civilization. Such blatant political maneuvering, we haven't seen it in the 20th century as what happened in Palestine. In 1897, a group of rich and powerful people of Jewish origin and background in Europe decided that they wanted to make Jerusalem into a majority Jewish territory. In 1897, Jerusalem had 3% Jewish population and around 85 to 87% Muslim population, and the rest Christian. 3% were Jewish people, the original Jews of that land, from many centuries. 100 years later, 75% of that region is Jewish. Think about that one statistic. In 1897, 3%. In 1997, 75%. What happened? The political colonialist powers, and in particular, the biggest criminal in this issue is the United Kingdom. What they did, and the Balfour Declaration, and the false promises, and the conniving, and the backstabbing that they did during World War I. The United Kingdom, England in particular, what it did, it promised the same land to 3 different people. The same land, and they knew they're doing this. But they promised it to the Arabs, they promised it to the Ottomans, and secretly they promised it as well to European Jewry. Now what right does England have to bargain with Palestine? And what is going to happen to the people living in Palestine? This is why, dear young men and women, I want you to understand this point. When Muslims say, we do not accept the legitimacy of the country of Israel, it's not because we're against the people or the religion. It's because of the mechanism of how this took place. It's because the people were forcibly removed. It's because people who didn't own the land decided who should get the land. A third party, Europe, is deciding that this land should be given to European Jews. What has that got to do with the people living? What right do Europe have? What right does England have to do this? Nobody asked the people living in that land for thousands of years. So what happened? Slowly but surely, from 1897 up until the 1920s and 30s, European Judaism began sending money and purchasing and intimidating, and many mobs and whatnot took place. Obviously, World War II exacerbated the situation because of the horrific tragedies of Hitler. And this is a very important point. Muslims, Hitler was an evil person. We don't support Hitler. Hitler was an evil person. And what he did, and I say this publicly, even today I will say this, if we were alive in Europe when Hitler was doing what he was doing, I would hope that I would be of the people who are helping those that are persecuted against the persecutors. If you know the reality of that person and what he was doing, they were not guilty of any crime that deserved that type of death. Our anger is not towards the people, it is towards the policies. We are not anti-Jewish, we are anti-Zionist. I want you all to memorize this point. Zionism is the political movement that asks or that claims that that region only belongs to fellow Zionists. We are against that. This is a type of apartheid. It's literally apartheid, because it's like saying the white people belong to America and the native Indians have nothing to do with this. This is racism. It's like saying South Africa, which was an apartheid country, when the Europeans, the white Europeans came, they said, we own this land, you blacks have no right to be here. This is blatant racism. And this is the reality of Israel. It is the only apartheid country that is still operating today. I'm not saying this. Our President Jimmy Carter says this. Quote Jimmy Carter, don't quote yourself. Tell your opponents, tell the people, hey, this is the United Nations. This is Jimmy Carter has said that it is an apartheid country. Nelson Mandela. If anybody knows what apartheid it is, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela said that the Palestinian people are facing a struggle in some ways even worse than the black South Africans. That is coming from Nelson Mandela. What more do you want? This isn't me. This isn't a religious fanatic. This isn't, no, neutral people are telling you that this is a humanitarian crisis. You have killed and massacred and forcibly removed millions of people in the first Nakba and the second Nakba. I don't have time to get into this. In 1947, in 1963, you forcibly removed millions of people, and because of that, Palestinians are all over the world. They were kicked out of their land. And those that didn't go, you threw them in concentration camps that is called Gaza. President Jimmy Carter says that Gaza and the occupied territories are the largest open-air prisons in the world. This is our president, who's a fundamentalist Christian. He's not a Muslim. And he calls it the largest open-air prisons in the world. And then you expect nothing to happen? And you expect that they're just going to stay there? You've taken every hope and every opportunity away. They cannot live normal lives.